JD Vance is not a stupid man. Therefore, the only conclusion is that he's lying. And he knows he's lying, and he's lying for political effect. That's not hugely surprising. What I think is slightly surprising, although diminishingly so, and slightly depressing, is the extent to which people like Vance will now say anything to fit in with Donald Trump's worldview.
Do you think Trump's going to focus on domestic politics now that we're getting into the run-up to the midterms, and therefore ignore Ukraine and other international topics?
I think that there's going to be an extent to which domestic politics will obviously come more into focus. And I mean, Trump is a unique politician in the sense that he's hardly a politician at all. But he will look for anywhere that will give him instant gratification, essentially. I mean, he talks about, making deals and his cherished authorship of The Art of the Deal, which he neither wrote nor, I suspect, has in fact read. But this is what he adores doing. He's talked about how this is what he does for fun. This is how he enjoys himself. Other people listen to music or appreciate literature or whatever. He does deals. He's not particularly good at it, as this track record shows, but he believes he is. And so I think if something were to pop up unexpectedly from the Ukraine crisis, which offered the opportunity of some kind of, superficial win, then he would take it. But I think, yes, there is an extent to which he's now looking at how he can continue to expand his control over parts of the government and the constitution over which the president has not traditionally had control, and to the extent to which he can also hammer the Democrats, who are, in fairness, apparently unable to organise any kind of opposition, except possibly in the shape of Gavin Newsom recently. So, yeah, I think there will be a decline in his interest in Ukraine unless he can see something in it for him.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've been watching Trump and Putin for a while, and it's to me, it's been quite clear that Putin's been stringing Trump along. But then in a recent article in the Times, JD Vance insisted that Putin isn't stringing Trump along on the peace talks, and claims that Russia has made significant concessions, like accepting Ukraine's territorial integrity. Do you actually think there's a genuine process in here? Do you think Putin has given any concessions, or do you think this is JD Vance being JD Vance and trying to say what he thinks people want to hear?
I don't think there's any truth in it at all. I mean, as far as I can see, Russia has made not a single concession. They haven't accepted Ukraine's territorial integrity because Putin still wants to absorb large portions of Ukraine into Russia, including those which he hasn't even conquered by military force. He doesn't accept that Ukraine is a separate country or should have the rights of a separate sovereign country. He wants effectively a veto over Ukraine's foreign policy. I think Vance is, JD Vance is not a stupid man. Therefore, the only conclusion is that he's lying. And he knows he's lying, and he's lying for political effect. That's not hugely surprising. What I think is slightly surprising, although diminishingly so, and slightly depressing, is the extent to which people like Vance will now say anything to fit in with Donald Trump's worldview.
But it's that saying anything is being reported again. Another article by Mark Galliotti. Ignore the bluster. Putin may be open to a Ukraine deal, I think was the title on it. Suggests that Putin might be flexible on security guarantees without necessarily NATO basing inside Ukraine. How credible do you think these quieter signals from Moscow are, especially amid Lavrov's continuing uncompromising demands and the ongoing drone and missile strikes against Ukrainian cities? It seems to be we're hearing different things from different people all of the time.
Well, I mean, if these are quiet signals coming out of Moscow, they are so quiet that, only dogs can hear them. It reminds me a little bit of the way that the Democrats used to talk about President Biden. Oh, no, he's actually really sharp. He's on the ball, except only when we're around. You never see him like that. And there is an element of that kind of discourse that, if only you could see Putin at the right time or understand what he's saying, you'd see that he's actually beginning to shift. I mean, as you say, he is continuing to bombard Ukraine. The war is still in full flow. And in fact, the last few weeks have seen the heaviest airstrikes by Russia against Ukraine of the entire conflict. So if there is some sort of creeping sense of Putin moderating his stance, it's incredibly subtle. And I think there's a basic point. Is it likely or not that Donald Trump is the only person who can perceive this because it's so subtle. I would have said not. There are clearly others who will disagree, but I think that Putin is playing, from his point of view, a brilliant game because he's been given concession after concession. He's literally had a red carpet rolled out for him by the President of the United States, despite being wanted for war crimes and an international pariah, and he's had to concede absolutely nothing. There is nothing Russia has given away, and it still cleaves to its the war aims that it had when it began the whole conflict. So I think there is perhaps a degree of wish fulfillment. This has gone on so long, so much has happened that surely something must be happening. But I see no shift in Vladimir Putin's position at all.
But there's pressure being put on Putin. Trump hasn't brought in the international sanctions, and it's interesting. Some of Zelensky's language has been, "Well, we're bringing our own sanctions." We're seeing increasing numbers of attacks against the Russian oil refining and oil storage infrastructure, and the oil and gas pipelines moving oil and gas around Russia and around Europe. And we're seeing pictures of columns of cars waiting outside petrol stations because I think they call it AL or IL 95 gasoline is not available to the general public easily. And your reports that 17% of Russia's oil refining capacity has been destroyed in the last 72 hours by Ukrainian attacks. Do you think Putin is actually worried, and could this push him towards trying to come up with some form of negotiated settlement with Donald Trump where he can get something out of it?
I think this is the only thing that will move him. I mean, actual military pressure, which brings with it economic pressure. I mean, it's interesting that, as you say, Donald Trump has talked a lot about sanctions. He's not actually introduced any new sanctions on Russia. He could do so. It's very clear to me that he has absolutely no desire to do so. He doesn't want to be at loggerheads with Putin because Putin is his friend in some bizarre way, insofar as he has friends. But I mean, it's interesting that Zelensky and the Ukrainian armed forces are now doing what one would expect any combatant to do in any war. They're targeting infrastructure, they're targeting fuel supply lines, issues like that, something which would be part of 101 during the Second World War. But if it is starting to make a difference, then I think that is the only thing which is going to affect Vladimir Putin's stance, because he is. To say that he plays hardball is an understatement which the people of Chechnya would regard with considerable irony, I think. But force is the only language he will understand, because he's seen certainly over the past 3 years, and particularly since Donald Trump returned to the White House, that he's not being forced to do anything else. Why should he concede anything when all he gets is not even harsh words? He actually gets party invitations. So that would make a difference if America were to be serious about economic sanctions, putting the squeeze on fuel, on logistics, things like that. But I see no evidence that America is going to do that. If Ukraine can step up to the plate and do some of it itself, that's good, and it may make a difference. But I still suspect that Vladimir Putin will be able to, or will seek to be able to, at any rate, carve out an incredibly superficial sort of submission to any kind of strictures, and will try to present Zelensky as the one who is immovable in these, as he always has done.
You've been watching Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you'd like access to exclusive content, please subscribe to Times Radio membership and watch us on YouTube. But you can now get us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. And don't forget, you can also listen to Times Radio for the latest updates on global affairs and read about them at thetimes.com. Thank you.